relations expert at Tel Aviv University. And Emmanuel, it seems that some kind of diplomatic rift has been healed here, but the underlying issue, we're not sure that really that issue, the underlying issue, the dispute over the Holocaust and how to interpret it, has in any way been resolved.
Right. Well, first of all, I think that you mentioned the law of last year when Yair Lapid, as a new foreign minister, kind of overreacted. And I think that today, as prime minister, as interim prime minister, he realizes that he kind of overreacted, because at the end of the day, it was about claims, about seized property. It was not only for Jews, by the way, it was also seized property during the Nazis, during the communist regime. According to the polls, there was a lot of abuse about those claims. In any case, as the two presidents agreed today, this should have been discussed in an open manner between the two countries. I think that today, a year after Israel and the Prime Minister realized that Poland, A, is an important ally of Israel within the European Union when it comes to votes of the European Council, and B, don't forget that Poland also has been kind of rehabilitated within the EU itself because of its very tough stance against Putin, despite the fact that Poland has been isolated within the EU because of its legislation that undermines the independence of the judiciary and of the media, because of the war in Ukraine and because of the very tough stance taken by Poland. So Poland is being rehabilitated even within the EU, and I think this is part of this kind of normalization also with Israel.
Yes, it does seem like this is another byproduct of the Ukraine conflict, which has been really sort of been redrawing some of these issues that of the past few years and give a new perspective on them. I would like to stay with us, Emmanuel, because we're going to stick with diplomacy. Speaking of Prime Minister Lapid, he will make his first visit abroad in that capacity tomorrow, flying to Paris for a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, this trip was originally scheduled for former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, but it will suit Lapid fine, given his warm personal relations with Macron. Now, the two are primarily expected to discuss Iran, given the resumption of talks to revive the nuclear agreement of which France is a signatory. And Emmanuel, Paris, a convenient destination for Yair Lapid, who as foreign minister did seem to have good relations with President Macron, despite the fact there are differences clearly between Paris and Jerusalem.
Yeah, but on the other hand, as you mentioned, France is a signatory of the JCPOA. Its stance actually has been since 2015, even before the JCPOA, the stance of the French government was actually very often tougher than that of the Obama administration. So on the JCPOA, there's been a lot of actually agreements between France and Israel. But the role of France also has to do with security issues in the East Med, with the French fleet having a strong presence against encroachments from Turkey against Greece. And this is also an Israeli interest, as Israel is trying to figure out whether or not Erdogan can be trusted in rebuilding the relationship. France has been very helpful in that. Also, don't forget that in the Sahel, in Africa, the French presence against the jihadists is also in Israel's interest. And again, here, the French have been pushed out by the Wagner militias that are supported by Russia. So there are many common interests and areas.
I mentioned to throw another one, Lebanon, which is a key area of French interest. Of course, France is a former colonial power there, and Israel right now, especially having issues, particularly with the Hezbollah element.
Even though the French admit today that they have very little leverage, in fact, on Lebanon, because Lebanon is so dysfunctional. Lebanon has been basically hijacked by Hezbollah, and despite the fact that Hezbollah lost a lot of votes in the previous election, the recent elections, at the end of the day, as I said, the French have not been able in the past few years to help rebuild Lebanon, to help it build a functional government. Not that Israel is so good about building functional coalitions, but really Lebanon is a failed state. And even though the French historically, of course, had a lot of leverage on this country, being the former colonial power, Lebanon has reached such a level of being a failed state that on this, unfortunately, France, like any other outside country, is of very little help when it comes to this country.
Very briefly, though, also Lapid and Macron have some similarities in their political.
Yes, so they both created a centrist party. Lapid 10 years ago, Macron 6 years ago. Politically, they're very close. Lapid had all these photo ops during previous elections with Macron when Macron was a candidate himself. Politically, they're very close, in being a centrist. And on that, indeed, they've been building a close relationship in recent years.
They'll be getting a nice photo op together tomorrow, certainly.
Which doesn't hurt for elections.
Does not hurt interim Prime Minister Lapid. Emmanuel Macron, thank you for that. Emmanuel Navon, thank you for that.